Depending on the kind of program that you're in or the kind of context that you're in, communication matters in different ways. But what we want you to hear primarily is that we're going to ask you and hold you accountable to learning how to communicate in a way that other people understand what you're trying to say. So sometimes that does mean writing. Sometimes that means videos. Sometimes that means conversations. Sometimes that means creative expressions of art. The medium that you use for communication can vary widely, and even the standards that you use to communicate. Like I said, if you're writing a research paper because that's your context, well then it does matter if you are using the right kind of citation and the right kind of different style relative to different professions. But primarily what we're wanting you to think about is, how do I structure my communication in such a way that other people know what I'm trying to say, and then make it contextually appropriate. A sermon looks different than a research paper. A research paper looks different than a reflection video. A conversation with a mentor looks different than a conversation with somebody in your local church. So there are lots of different ways and context in which you communicate. And they matter. Communication matters. And there are a few things that can be helpful as you're preparing to communicate. And that's what we're inviting you to think about in Outcome Zero, is the why behind communication, and then what are some of the things that are helpful when you're wanting to communicate. So we already talked a little bit about the why. Communication matters because it's what we use to help other people understand what we're trying to say. So that's one. How do you express your thoughts in a way that other people can hear them and understand them? That's the why. The how, there's all kinds of different ways to think about that, but I'm going to give you a few examples. The first is take time to edit. If you're going to write something, if you're going to do a video, if you're going to think about what you want to present to somebody, take time to edit it. Take time to think through and say, all right, this is what I want to communicate. I wrote it down a little bit, or I thought through it a little bit, and then I went back and edited it a little bit. Editing, you'd be surprised how much that helps. If you want a super quick tip on editing something you wrote, read it backwards. So write it and then read it backwards, and you'll find how quickly you can catch a few things when you edit. The other thing that you want to think about when getting ready to communicate is giving space between when you finish whatever it is you're wanting to communicate and when you're going to present it. So if I'm going to do a presentation to somebody a week from now, it's helpful if I create that presentation somehow now, leave it for a day, come back a day or two later and revisit it, because you'll approach it with a different viewpoint or a different angle, and it's really helpful to do that. The last thing that you want to think about is what kind of communication communicates well in your context. Now again, sometimes that could be written communication or spoken communication or nonverbal communication. What we are wanting you to pay attention to is, yes, your journey through Kairos is very flexible, and professional communication or master's level communication will look different depending upon your context. But in order for that to be the case, you need to learn what your context is and what is understood to be contextually appropriate in your context. So communication matters, pay attention to why it matters, and then think about what does it mean for it to be contextually appropriate in your context.